Comparison readings of voltages using an old voltmeter, a modern day digital multimeter, and a test light. First we'll take a reading of voltage using the modern day multimeter, 6 volts, and using my skin resistance. I'm holding this now. Oh, look at that, 6 volts. How about that? Or nearly 6 volts. So even though there's no good connectivity here, so if you're testing a circuit and you had a high resistance wire, like a corroded electrical wire, the multimeter here tells you everything's fine, good to go. Next one, analog meter, 6 volts, high resistance wire, corroded electrical lead, whatever, 2 volts. Oh, I'm supposed to have 6, I have 2, clearly I have a problem somewhere. So this tells me right up front there's an issue, but you know, it's kind of hard to say exactly why, but there's definitely a problem. Lastly, we'll use the test light. Excuse me while I hook this up. Test light, 6 volts, lights up, high resistance reading, corroded electrical wire, no light, nothing. Nothing at all. Touch it, good. If I touch it, good. If I use a high resistance, about 1 meg for typical skin resistance, nothing. So when you're testing voltages on wires that are disconnected, like you're trying to trace out a problem, it's not connected in circuit where there's a load, this would work fine. But if you're just saying, hey, I'm trying to see where the voltage disappears or what's going on, or if there's a problem, and you've disconnected the load, whatever that could be, maybe it's a distributor, I mean a ignition coil or something like that that typically pulls a load. By the way, I don't think you ever want to check the voltage on a distributor coil with the thing running. You'd probably get all kinds of badness for your meter. There's a lot of inductive kickbacks involved here. And maybe if the car wasn't running and the ignition coil was turned on and actually drawing current. I'm not sure how that would work with a modern era ignition coil. But anyway, if you're disconnecting wires to check voltages, keep in mind that this, because it's high impedance, if there's corroded wire that would normally not allow the circuit to work, this is going to show you full voltage if there's no load. If you can you can still use this if you put a load on it, like a test lamp, but if you're doing that, you might as well just use a test lamp. I mean, with the test lamp on it, this will now work like you'd expect it to. For instance, see here I am getting 6 volts, but as soon as I put that on there, nothing. See, now I've got a load. I've got a test lamp load in on it as well. So then the digital multimeter works fine. But that's because I have the test lamp in the circuit. If I take the test lamp out of the circuit, I hold on, I get 6 volts again. So keep that in mind when you're using these things and you're checking circuitry for voltages. They're fine for reading voltage, but don't assume they're going to put any load on the circuit, which you need to do in order to test the voltage in its actual working voltages when it's actually on and working. Anyway, just a little brief discussion. I personally like these for that reason, because they can give you a relative reading of what's going on with respect to resistance and such. I find the analogs easier to deal with. They don't jump around. These are great for quick things, but that's my go-to thing. We used to have something called a vacuum tube voltmeter. This is a volt ohm meter. Brief history. Volt ohm meter. It's a passive device in that it reads voltages directly. It doesn't have any kind of circuitry to aid in the reading of the voltage. So the meter itself draws a little bit of current. That's the load. That's why it's dropping down to 2 volts. This thing is active. It uses digital circuitry to deal with that, so I don't know how these work. And we used to have something called a vacuum tube voltmeter. It looked a lot like that, but it actually had vacuum tubes in it, and its impedance was about the same as these things. So they were great for reading voltages in circuits when you don't want to have the meter influencing the voltage. A lot of times basic automotive type stuff, that's not the same deal. I mean, we're not talking about electronic stuff where you want to get voltages without putting a load in an operating circuit. Most automotive applications, well, vintage stuff anyway, that's not the case. You want the load, which is why I personally think the test lamp is probably the best thing for checking voltages on old cars where your concern is, do I have wiring circuitry issues that may be related to corrosion resistance or other problems. Modern cars, I mean, none of this applies, all right? Modern cars are a different animal altogether. Old cars, it's a common problem to have corrosion, other kind of frayed wires, other problems that could put a high resistance in your path of a circuit that would not catch, the meter would not catch. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.